Hello everybody, my name is Archana Bansal. I'm one of the doctors working at Parexel International. A bit about me, so I graduated from India, I did my medicine and then I did pediatric training in the UK and I've been doing research for the last few years. I've done research from phase 1 to phase 3 trials. I've been involved with children mostly and currently I'm doing phase 1 trials in healthy volunteers. Just a bit of an outline as to why do we really need medical research. So medical research has been going on for quite some time, almost about a century now, I would say, if you ignore the earlier attempts by the novices. So there are around 30,000 known medical conditions, and as you can see, only about a third of them are treatable. That just kind of enunciates the fact why we need medical research, because there's so many people currently living with non-treatable medical conditions and requiring various modalities, either for an intervention to make their symptoms better, or a diagnostic method that would help us diagnose their medical condition, or preventive methods. Going on to clinical trials. So clinical trials basically are very, very important. They are responsible for promoting the advancement of medical knowledge and medical care. They need to be conducted in a safe way. We have to prove that the medication that is being research is efficacious and that we are not affecting the quality of care provided to our patients, and we need evidence that it all works, and that is when the medicine actually ends up coming into market. And there are various phases of clinical trials going from phase 1 to phase 4. I'm sure if you go on the Ocular website, there's quite a few details about the clinical trials that have been going on ocular melanoma. A few of them phase 1 to phase 2. The early phase unit at Parexel deals with phase 1 trials. What it basically means is that a new medication, when it is discovered, it is tested in animals for the first time, and we do something called preclinical studies. Some of them in animals, some of them in vivo, and we want to find out what is the toxicological profile of the medication. Is it safe to be given? And after these animal studies are performed, a whole proposal is created, a protocol is devised, which is reviewed by national authorities, like the National Ethics Committee, and MHRA, which is the Medicine and Health Regulation Agency of in the UK. It's FDA in America. So as you can see, there's a lot of expertise involved when it comes to conducting a clinical trial, or even making the decision as to whether a certain clinical trial should be placed into action. So after all this is decided, finally a medication comes into phase 1 research, wherein we come up with a very, very small dose, and we decide whether the medicine is safe to be given in humans, and how the medication moves through your body, how it is eliminated through your body, how it is processed through your body. And sometimes, depending on what medication we are researching, we also look for biomarkers that let us know the progress or the deterioration level of that particular medical condition that you are going through. So the research in itself is basically concentrating not just on just giving a dose to a person and looking for side effects, but actually coming up with the right dose that would be efficacious and show effect clinically. Next slide, please. So what happens during a clinical trial? So it's the testing of new treatment, as I told you about. So you can evaluate different kind of interventions for identifying, diagnosing, and treating a disease or a syndrome or a condition. You can examine methods for identifying risk factors, so different methods and medical devices that are in the industry. It's all been researched to see whether they actually do what they are supposed to do and what people are saying that they should be doing. And finding ways to prevent, so prevention is always better than cure. So finding ways to prevent initial development or recurrence of a disease. So currently, I think I think there are quite a few projects going on wherein people have identified certain risk factors or predispositions that people can have that puts them at increased risk of certain diseases. And that's all thanks to research. And it also helps us to explore and measure ways to improve comfort and quality of life for people with chronic illnesses. There are lots of chronic illnesses wherein we don't have a definitive medication to cure people, but we do have disease-modifying agents, and that's what Parexel does. So we are researching. Our research expands through various clinical areas, including immunological disorders, and some of the other infectious diseases and cardiovascular conditions, respiratory conditions such as asthma, and of course we are open to ocular conditions as well. The history of clinical trials. So as I said, the clinical trials have been going on and the research has been going on for almost about a century now. However, it was not really conducted in the best way around 1940s. As you can see, there's quite a few experiments that were conducted not in the best manner, which led to kind of good clinical practice recommendations and recommendations from Belmont, the Declaration of Helsinki, and the Nuremberg Code to come up with an idea and a regulation to conduct research in the most ethical way. We always make sure that the patient's safety, well-being, and their rights come first, okay? You have to make sure when you're doing research that you're respecting your participants. The beneficiaries, so whatever benefit they're getting, we have to outweigh it against the risk of the medication that they are trialing. And you have to justify giving that medication to a person, making sure that you're not putting them at increased risk. I don't know if you guys know about these tragedies. So in 1937, there was a sulfanilamide tragedy, wherein a new antibiotic, sulfanilamide, was diluted with a diluent, which was supposed to be toxic to humans, and people were not aware of it. And this led to death of almost 100 people. And at this time, there were no animal studies done before a medication came into market. There was no regulation whatsoever. And after this, the Food Cosmetic Drug Act came into practice in America, wherein animal studies were made kind of compulsory before you put in new medication out in the market. The thalidomide tragedy we're all aware of. Thalidomide was a medication given to pregnant women in 1950s for morning sickness, and it resulted in lots of malformations in children. And it again led to thinking as to why and how these things are happening, and the fact that we do need to research and monitor for adverse events. And then the Tuskegee experiment, I'm not sure if you know, it was quite interesting, actually. There was this study wherein they involved almost 100 people of Afro-Caribbean or African-American origin. And without their consent, a natural history of syphilis was how syphilis evolves was basically studied by the clinical research people. And of course, some of them died, almost 100 people died. There were around 20 kids born with congenital syphilis, which has got lifelong implications. And women were also infected, and their partners were infected as well. So all of this led to a kind of regulatory procedure to be put into place. And that is how the ICHGCP came into practice. So it's International Council of Harmonization when conducting clinical research and good clinical practice, wherein we have to make sure that the patient's health, safety, and well-being is of utmost importance when considering research. So if any of you are considering taking part into research, please remember that your safety, your well-being, and even the confidentiality of your data is given utmost importance when conducting clinical trials. So there are phases of clinical trials from phase 1 to phase 4. Phase 1 is what I am doing currently at Parexel. We do our studies on healthy volunteers. However, if it is medical conditions, so for rare medical conditions, we do phase 1, phase 2 trials, wherein we are doing trials on patients. So we need about 10 to 100 people in phase 1 trials. As I told you before, it is to see whether the medication is safe to be given in humans. And it costs you about $10 million to conduct a phase 1 studies. So after the phase 1 study, all the data is reviewed, and then we come up with a dose that we can try in patients for the first time, and that is the phase 2 study. Okay, and in phase 2 study, we need about 50 to 500 people with the condition that you're devising or developing the medication for. And it is to study safety and effectiveness of the medication. So whether the medicine works, does it actually do what it's supposed to do? That is what we are studying. And it costs about $20 million to do a phase 2 study. In phase 3 study is more advanced, wherein about several hundred to thousands of patients receive this medication. And it is again confirmation of effectiveness. We seek regulatory approval and marketing authorization. And only after the phase 3 study is successful, the drug comes into the market, and that is phase 4. And the surveillance continues, because we still have to do post-marketing surveillance to look for any evolving adverse event or any evolving side effects that patients may have, which may or may not lead to the medication being pulled out of the market. It has happened in the past. So we have to make sure, again, emphasizing the fact that the patient's safety comes first, okay? And the life cycle of the medication is basically, as I told you before, you discover medicine, you test it in the animals, you go through the clinical trials, and after the phase 3, the regulatory authorities review it, a new drug application is made, and after that, the post-marketing surveillance continues. So as you can see, it can take up to 3 to 6 plus 7 plus 2, so it's about 15 years almost for the medication to actually comes into the market. So it's a very, very long process. And the post-approval process continues. It says 3 to 6 years, but it basically continues for the rest of the life of that medication as long as it's in the market, because we do need to monitor the side effects as well. This is what we do in Parexel. It's a very simple slide of what the volunteer experiences, if at all you're considering participating in a trial with us. So what we usually do is we do early engagement. We have a dedicated team that interacts with you, with the volunteers who want to participate in the clinical trial. There's a whole questionnaire we have to go through before people sign up for a clinical trial, making sure that they're eligible and they're supported at the same time. We're engaging patients via patient organizations. We help with the feasibility of the study, with the study design. We also help with review of the materials and give suggestions and input when needed. We also do adaptations at site level to accommodate needs of specific patient groups. So we have got tie-ups with our own ophthalmologist at Northwick Park Hospital, and then with Moorfield Hospital as well, if at all we need more input if we were to do studies on ocular melanoma. Usually, so after all this, when we feel that that certain person is eligible to participate in the study, they have to come for something called a screening visit, wherein we go through a consent form in detail. We explain them what it is that they're signing up for, what are the procedures that will be involved, and what it is that we would be looking for. So it's a baseline assessment of their vital signs, ECG, urine sample, blood samples, the demographics. We have doctors on site. We can do physical examination and medical history, and we perform an informed consent session. And only after the volunteers are happy to consent for the clinical trial, we proceed with the rest of their information. All the data is kept confidential and is stored in an anonymized way, so your identity is protected. Once you are eligible to participate in the study, you have to stay in the unit for as long as it says on the protocol. So for some studies, it can be just a couple of days. For some studies, it can be normal. It also depends, depending on a study, we have offered patients. So we had a study recently we did on asthma patients wherein we offered them to actually stay at their own home because we wanted them to have the comfort and to be living in the same environment. So that is something we offer as well. And after that, the admission, the dosing, and then there's a follow-up period wherein you may have to visit the unit for some of maybe like 4 or 5 times, depending on how many times the protocol specifies it. And we continue your safety monitoring during that as well. Support is provided. As I said, we have doctors on site. Our unit is staffed by nurses 24/7, and they are all trained in advanced basic life support courses, and the doctors are trained in advanced life support. So it's like a mini hospital setting offering care. Okay. And these are the top 5 reasons people choose to participate in clinical trials. To advance medicine, most of them, about 33%. 29% wanted to participate to improve the lives of others, which is very kind of them and very generous, I would say. To help improve my conditions, so phase 1, phase 2 trials that actually happen in patients that help to improve their own conditions. So they do take part in clinical trials to earn extra money. So some of the so mostly phase 1 clinical trials that are taken place in healthy volunteers are paid out. There's a payout of certain amount for the trouble that they go through for participating in the trials. So they do get paid certain amount of money. And some of them get free medical care. So I have worked in phase 2 clinical trials wherein I worked with patients and who were in a no option kind of situation wherein nothing was working for their medical condition, and they were very thankful that we could help them. And of course, it was in NHS. NHS does a lot of work, as you all know. And the sponsors were also very, very kind. One of the studies was for a very, very rare medical condition, and they offered the medication for free for the little one, which was quite amazing because it costs millions and millions of pounds to develop these medications, and even to maintain it, it costs a lot of money to get one person on that medication. So it's quite nice, actually. And why is it important to participate in clinical trials? Well, I think it's a more, it's just out of good faith maybe, but to help improve quality of life, to come up with better tests and treatments, contribute medical research and access to care. That's it, I think. Yeah, thank you for listening.